You're listening to Fast Facts Perio Edition. And now, here's your host, Katrina Sanders.
Hello, and welcome to Fast Facts Perio Edition. I am embarrassed to share how long it took me to go down the rabbit hole this week on PubMed around today's topic, which is E. coli in the mouth? ? What's the deal with E. coli in the mouth? Now, if you remember back to hygiene school, you remember being in microbiology class, wondering why you're there, and also studying that E. coli is primarily associated with fecal oral route, fecal contamination, or through consuming like diseased animal products, right? It's bacteria that is found in the environment, in foods, and then in our intestines, as well as the intestines of animals. It's a large and very diverse group of bacteria, so we won't get extremely specific, but we did learn in microbiology that some specific strains of E. coli can certainly cause disease like diarrhea, urinary tract infections, respiratory illness, pneumonia, etc. So I stumbled upon this research study that started to discuss E. coli and how it has been isolated in the mouths of individuals who have had periodontitis, but we really don't understand the role that E. coli currently plays in periodontitis. So it's not very well understood. Current data indicates right now that E. coli could be involved in periodontal disease because it's highly virulent. It is quite resistant to many antibiotics, and there is a wide distribution of different types of strains of E. coli. So this is where my journey started. And then I stumbled upon this study that I just had to share with all of you because I know how much you all appreciate my dorky, nerdy brain and the studies that I stumble upon that I find to be fascinating. Okay, so this was a study that was done back in June of 2012. And this study was an investigative study that looked at fecal contamination in saliva samples from children 3 years old or younger attending child daycare centers as a means of essentially trying to identify how does or could E. coli enter the mouth through a myriad of means. Okay. So you know where I'm going with this. Dirty mouth, clean it up, right? And this week we are looking at the fact that, yes, in this research study, they found an association between children who are routinely entering into a daycare environment and the condition of their oral cavity when it comes to the presence of E. coli in their saliva. Put simply, this research study compared samples of E. coli in the morning before mom or dad or grandma or grandpa or whomever dropped the kiddo off at daycare. And they found that the saliva samples in the morning before we dropped kiddo off at daycare were negative for E. coli. In the afternoon, upon picking up the kiddo from daycare, the saliva was positive for E. coli. This certainly demonstrates that the exposure to daycare center environments are a favorable environment for the transmission of E. coli from fecal origin into the saliva of children. I think that's a great place to conclude today's program on looking at E. coli, periodontal disease, and its presence in the oral cavity through salivary testing. That's all I have this week. Stay tuned next week as I promise to unpack more scintillating, maybe not as gross, data in our future weeks. This has been another episode of Fast Facts Perio Edition with Katrina Sanders. Please feel free to reach me on Instagram at The Dental Wine Genist or on my website, www.katrinasanders.com. Cheers.